Today, I'd like to talk about building cubby holes into walls. So, what exactly is a cubby hole? Let's say you took a lot of time and effort to remodel your master bathroom. You've got it looking just the way you want it to. Then you realize the first time you go to brush your teeth, the toothbrushes clutter up your countertop, and the electrical cords are an unsightly mess. So much for your remodel job. But here's a fix. Move the toothbrushes into the wall. This is a cubby hole. There's an outlet built into the cubby hole, so you can still plug in your toothbrushes, as well as a hole that you can feed the excess electrical cord down. This provides for a nice, clean installation. Once you've mastered the art of cubby hole building, you'll find there are many uses for them. Storage areas for your important reading, extra toilet paper so you know you'll never run out. How about a place to store your music player? I built this one for the convenience of guests visiting my home. It is mounted behind a bathroom door, so with the door open, people don't even know it's there. When you walk into the guest bathroom, you close the door. Now you can see it. Should we have one of our many power outages at night, you now have illumination to finish whatever you were doing at the time. I would strongly recommend a cubby hole like this behind your master bedroom door. But instead of a flashlight, store a fire extinguisher. You spend more time in your bedroom than any other room in the house. If a fire breaks out, you have access to a fire extinguisher before you leave the room. I'd like to place a cubby hole on this wall at the exact same level as an existing cubby hole in the same room. To accomplish this task, use a laser level. It shoots out a laser beam on each side and allows you to extend a horizontal line all the way across the room. Before you start cutting holes in the walls, use a stud finder to figure out where all the studs are. The red arrow will light up when you hit the edge of a stud. Take some measurements to figure out how big of a cubby hole that you'd like to build. Then transfer those measurements over to your wall. Now to cut the sheetrock, you can go old school and use a sheetrock saw. The sharp point on the saw allows you to penetrate the sheetrock, and then you use it like any other saw. Here's the problem with this process. If you don't know what's behind that wall, you run the risk of cutting something with your saw, like maybe electrical wires. The solution is you could use a spiral saw from RotoZip. This saw is designed specifically for cutting sheetrock. The cutting edge on this tool is in a spiral shape, and its cutting depth is adjustable. So if you set the depth of the cut only 1 millimeter deeper than the sheetrock, you minimize the risk of cutting anything behind that sheetrock. I use a shop vac to capture all of the sheetrock dust that comes out while I'm cutting. This allows you to make sheetrock cuts with no mess. And behind the wall, well, what do you know? There's wires. This will make the next step in our plan a little more difficult, but it's nothing we can't handle. We're going to make a wood box to go inside of the cutout. A standard 1x4 board is actually wider than a 2x4, so we're going to need to trim just a little bit off the edge of this board. And the tool for that is called a jointer, if you don't happen to have a table saw handy. You tell the machine how much wood to trim off. Set the blade speed according to the thickness and type of material you're cutting. Check that your guide rails are square. And finally, that your safety cover doesn't bind. That's it. You're ready to start cutting wood. I've found that instead of making one deep cut, I make 2 shallow cuts. I usually get much better results this way. Now let's take care of that wiring problem we found earlier in the video. Simply use a router to make a groove all the way down your board to make room for the wires. Now this is really important, so I'm going to mention it twice in this video. Any screws you put into this board through the sheetrock have to be short enough not to touch those wires. What I'm going to do is, I want the vertical supports, which are these ones. They're going to be mounted in the wall in this direction. I want to secure these biscuits in here, because these are basically going to be shelves that the top and bottom one will be sitting on. So I'll mount this one in place, then I'll slip that in there with a little glue, then I'll put a couple screws in there, and put the other one in. To mount these biscuits, you're going to use this remarkable tool called a biscuit joiner. And this is what a biscuit looks like. It's a piece of wood that's been compressed by many tons of force. When it's exposed to moisture, it expands back out to its original size, making a nice tight fit. So when you're not using them, store them in the airtight container they came in. Even moisture in the air can cause them to start expanding. To use the tool, first mark a straight line on the two boards you want to put the biscuit into. The jointer has a line right here that you're going to align with those lines. When in operation, a blade comes out of the tool exactly half the depth of the biscuit, and where this line is will be the center of the biscuit. Here I'm showing how to put two boards together edge to edge. When you make a box, the process is pretty much the same. The only difference is, on one of the boards you're going to do a slot in the top of the board instead of the edge of the board. You'll wind up with holes like this in the center of your board. The biscuits easily fit into place and makes for a very sturdy connection, but until it's glued, you do still probably want to handle it pretty gently or else. Now it's time to install our box into the wall. Since during installation you can't grab a hold of the edges or the ends of the boards, these temporary screws will actually let me hang on to the boards. First I installed the board on the stud side. Remember, it has the groove for the wiring. And again, remember the screws have to be short enough not to make it to the wiring. Next, install the bottom of the box. Okay, now that two sides of your box are supported, you can now install the other two sides at the same time. And the corner biscuits will hold the box in place until you're ready to install your screws. Your guess is as good as mine as to how you can film someone putting a box into a cubby hole, but let's give it a try. You can see the last board I'm putting into place has the biscuits at the top and the bottom. Use the screws to pull it into place. Now screw through the sheetrock and into your boards. Use a short screwdriver to remove your temporary screws. While building the box, I decided to go a little bit larger than my original plan. I found a flashlight I liked better. This is not actually a problem because with the rotozip, it's very easy to trim just a little sliver of sheetrock off after the fact. Now it's time to repair the sheetrock. The first thing we have to do is protect these corners. To do that, we'll use this material right here. It's a thin strip of metal bent at a 90-degree angle, and it's covered with some paper to allow the mud to stick to it. Let's hold it up to the cubby hole and mark it, then take it out and cut it. You could probably easily cut it with tin snips, but since I happen to have a metal cutter, I'm just going to go ahead and use that. Here I'm showing it being used in a different project. I ran all of my cuts at a 45-degree angle so they'll overlap beyond my cubby hole. Now to apply the mud we'll need some specialty tools. At least 3 different width putty knives, a trough to hold your mud, and a bucket of mud called joint compound by the professionals. Okay, I've already applied a thin layer of mud to the wall. The mud is still wet. This will hold our protective covers in place. You then want to go back and apply mud to the outside of the covers, gently tapering it away from the corners. At the same time, apply a thin layer of mud to the entire inside surface of your cubby hole. After the first layer of mud has dried, use your next larger putty knife to apply another layer of mud. This time the taper out's going to go much further. The goal here is for your taper to be gentle enough that people looking at it can't tell the raised edge is actually higher than the normal sheetrock. After your final layer of mud is dried, lightly sand it down. Now you'll notice the next problem is the texture. The area you reworked needs to be textured to match the surrounding area. There's at least 2 ways you can address this. You can actually purchase texturing that comes out of a can. I have tried this and it's terrible. While applying it, the fumes will drive you out of your house for hours. And despite having an adjustable nozzle, the applied product didn't look anything like the original texturing. So I sanded it off and bought one of these, a real texture gun. Let me share a quick side trip with you. First, I went to the big box store to rent one. They wanted somewhere around $70. So I walked 1 aisle away from the rental center. I found a brand new texture gun in a box for $50. If I bought the gun, used it, and threw it away, I'd be money ahead. But I didn't throw it away. Moral of the side trip, think twice before renting. To apply your texturing, the things you'll need are texture gun, same mud you used before, some water, and a mixing tool of some sort. First we have to thin the mud out so we can spray it. So, put some mud in a bucket, add a little bit of water, then mix it up. You're kind of going for a consistency of something like this, where it'll drip off your mixing tool. You'll pour the mud into the hopper. Every time you pull the trigger, mud will be dropped down into a stream of air that's coming out of this tool. The air and the mud are forced through one of these 3 nozzles. The small nozzle is for light orange peel. The large nozzle is for popcorn on sealing. I'm using the center nozzle. Let's take a look at the spraying process. When I was all done, it seemed to blend pretty well. All that's left is to paint it. Oh yeah, and don't forget to install your flashlight when you're done. People who visit your house will appreciate it. Well, thanks for watching.